There we go. So, morning everybody. What I wanted to do today was to talk you through a tool or a model or an idea that I really like. It's called the emotional bank account. You might have come across it before, in which case, hopefully it's just a useful reminder and a prompt to use it. I like it because it seems really simple and accessible. I have to admit, I'm an ex-banker, so that could be a reason, but I don't think so. And it really helps just tune your awareness into relationships and how they are. So that's the power of it. What I would nonetheless like to do just to start anyway is just a reminder of something that you know is a principle of ours, and I think always worth remembering, because we can get trapped into worlds in which expectations are different, which is this idea that we are all leaders, irrespective of our seniority, irrespective of our experience. If we sit down and think about the things that we say leaders do, then actually we can all do those. We can all choose to do those. Of course, practice at them will make us better, but that's equally true for people in positions of leadership. And also, we would argue that effective leadership requires everyone working together. It's not, you can't lead alone, to use a classic phrase. And it's worth just as a reminder that that's an important settling position as to that's true for all of us, whatever experience we have. And then what I'd like us to do before I move on is just to take one of our pause points. I asked you just to take a moment to settle and think. Let's just take a moment to think of what went really well in the last few days for you. Just think of one thing that just pleased you. It could be very simple, very simple. It could be you felt good when you thanked somebody for their work. It could be you got to the end of the day without anything going wrong. Right? It could be anything simple. It could be at the weekend, or it could be a lovely walk. Anything. Just take a moment, tune into something that went well, that was positive in the last few days, and just think about it for a few seconds. And then if that triggers something in your mind to do differently, that's great. And if it doesn't, never mind, hold on to that positive thought. Okay, so let me tell you about the emotional bank account. So I'm basically going to describe this to you for 10 minutes or so, and then ask you, oh, the slides have gone ahead on their own. Don't know what's going on. Sorry, people. Just go back. The emotional bank account, sorry. Yeah, I'll just spend a little time explaining the tool. Of course, if you have questions, please interrupt and speak up. And then really just going to ask you to think about using it for a few minutes yourself on your own. The emotional bank account is usually attributed to Stephen Covey, who I would imagine many of you have heard of. His famous original book is The 7 Habits of a Successful Leader, way back in 1989. But actually the Covey community have written lots of books. Stephen Covey, I think, had 9 or 10 children, I forget, many of whom are in the same field, network, and run the organization now. And certainly there's some good books out there. Actually, as a minor little flag, I have a friend who was lucky enough to work with Stephen Covey back in the day, and would say how the family used to rib Stephen Covey about that his ideas were brilliant, but his writing was not necessarily that good. So I actually think The 7 Habits of a Successful Leader is quite a tough read, but the habits are excellent. So, look them up elsewhere, or consider that, be aware of that. I've also seen The 7 Habits of, I think it's of a teenager, or it might be a successful teenager. I can't remember. I think it's The 7 Habits for a Teenager, which is a lovely book. It's a little bit American with its examples, but if you've got a truculent teenager, you might find they really like it. It's really well written, very simple, and it's quite motivational, I think. Anyway, that's the one background. The other area which is probably more appropriate, is the emotional bank account probably came from the Gottmans, which are a married couple who worked in the field of relationships and marriage counsels for many years. They're psychologists and psychiatrists from the 1970s onwards, and they also used this phrase and this idea to help with relationships, usually in the marriage context. And so Stephen, if you like, Stephen Covey expanded it out from there. So this is the idea, the emotional bank account. It basically says that when you think of a relationship, any relationship with anybody, you have a bank account with them that metaphorically represents your relationship. And it's emotional because, of course, relationships are intrinsically emotional. There's emotion in all our relationships. And it's a way of considering your relationship, saying, irrespective of the relationship, there are things you do that make that relationship stronger, credits, positive things in banking language. And there are things that you can easily do, unintentionally or otherwise, that acts as debits, that are negative to your relationship. And everybody has one of these bank accounts with everybody else. So for example, I talk about myself and Jenny, I have a bank account with her and she has a bank account with me. So it's the other side of the same relationship. It's her view of the relationship, if you like. And they work in tandem, but of course, I don't see, I'm less aware of Jenny's version of the bank account from her perspective. I can just see it from my perspective. And so it's drawing attention to the idea that we can look at our relationships, any relationships, work, outside work, and think about, well, what are the things that I do or don't do that act as positives or negatives into this bank account, into my overall relationship? And these can be very simple. So, you know, a simple credit is just thanking somebody for something. The act of saying thank you can act, you know, as a credit. It's a positive. It builds the relationship. And if I take that example in a challenging way, not saying thank you could act as a debit, even though you didn't realize you should say thank you. It acts as a negative because somebody else was hoping for a thank you or expecting a thank you. And that draws our attention to the individuality of relationships, because for somebody, not saying thank you could be really important and act as a debit. For somebody else, it might not matter at all. They might not be expecting the thank you. So it really doesn't have a negative impact. It may even not have much of a positive impact, right? If you say thank you. So it draws our attention to this idea of how individual our relationships are, and to think about those different elements of the debits and credits. So this, in the terminology, is the small print. The metaphor of the emotional bank account has small print, which should include Phil's ability to use PowerPoint slides, it would seem. Just 1 second. Ah, dear. I do apologize, everybody. I don't know why my slides are doing this. We were laughing at the beginning about technology. Not that there's anything to give away. Anyway, let me go back to this, the small print. Oh, heck. I'm sorry, guys. I do not know why it's doing this. I'm going to keep holding it back, keep flicking it back when I can. So there are a number of things to think about when you're I'm going to share this a different way, I think. Give me a second, everyone. This really is not helping with mindfulness, is it? Hang on. Hang on. I think there must be some inbuilt feature that is causing the PowerPoints to flick forwards. That's in the build, and I don't know quite why that's happening. So if I share like that, it shouldn't happen. So hopefully you can all now see my screen with the emotional bank account. It's the same slide. I just haven't put it in SlideShare. So let me talk through these ideas, and hopefully they might be making you smile when you think about how this bank account works. The first one I particularly like, it's a non-interest bearing bank account. Of course, it's quite a few years since any of us managed to earn any interest on our bank accounts. But this is the key thing about the emotional bank account. So it's that idea that because no interest applies, the value of your relationship can reduce. So you have to keep making deposits. You have to keep doing positive things in order to really maintain the strength of that relationship. It's not saying the relationship will disappear or go negative if you don't do that, but it is saying it will reduce. So you have to think about making deposits all the time to really maintain a good relationship. Next idea is you can't make a deposit and a withdrawal at the same time, hoping they'll balance out. So that's an idea around authenticity, isn't it? And that if I did something positive in order to allow me to do something negative, you're going to see through it, right? So if I suddenly say thank you for something to Jenny when I don't normally say thank you for something, and then immediately afterwards I do something negative that upsets her, they don't balance out. She will see through that. The withdrawal, the negative act of upsetting her will be greater than the value of the deposit I tried to make. So there's no, it's that idea that actively making withdrawals is a bad idea. Actively making a debit to your bank account is a bad idea. You're trying to keep it positive always. In a similar way, a single withdrawal can wipe out lots of deposits. So this is really interesting. And I bet if you think about it, you've got relationships like this all the time, where you've built up really strong relationships with somebody. You possibly accidentally do something which they perceive negatively, and suddenly the relationship really goes much weaker. To build that back up again, to get the trust again, requires a lot of effort, a lot of attention. What might an example be there? Well, I can think of an example that happened to me recently with somebody in business who I've known for a while, worked with a little bit, not hugely, but felt I had a really good relationship. And we had a call, a meeting where there was some real challenging discussion. We were really challenging each other. We were acknowledging that. We were sharing that this is a challenging situation. However, afterwards, after the meeting, I learned separately that one person in that call was really upset by how hard I challenged them. So they perceived that I was challenging them as an individual. And I didn't mean to do that, but the point is I did do that. And that's what matters, because it's the impact on them that matters rather than my view of it. And in that case, that single withdrawal, that single event in which she felt I had almost insulted her, really drew us back in terms of the strength of our relationship, and shows I'm going to have to work hard at building it up again. That links to the next point, which is the stronger the bank account, though, the more it can withstand that idea. So the more you've worked at being positive, building up the relationship, the more it can suffer those accidental withdrawals. And therefore, logically, the longest relationships can withstand withdrawals the best. The example offered by Stephen Covey as marriages usually makes people smile, because most people can think of examples where marriages is not necessarily the best example, but the logic makes sense. And hopefully some of you have been in a relationship at some point where you can see that, where you've been together a long time, such that when something negative happens, you're able to recover and get over it because of the underlying strength of your understanding. And here, the last one I really like: the best deposits are not requested. So you're not doing it because someone's asking you to, you're doing it because it's a natural, authentic act. You are thanking somebody because they did something and you're grateful for it. It's not done on purpose to build the relationship. Again, people will see through the lack of authenticity. And it's them, they need to see the deposits as being deposits, as positive things. So if you do it on purpose, so to speak, it may not work. It really needs to be genuine. So all of those ideas build up to how you look to build your emotional bank account. And these are the 6 major deposits, 6 style of deposits that really help to build relationships. The first is understanding the individual. Really crucial. So stopping to think about each individual relationship matters. We can't make assumptions. We have to think about where they're coming from. Like my example earlier of praise for some people has a much smaller effect. Praise for other people is really important. It helps them move forward. And so you need to understand the individual, put attention into that exercise, get to know them. Of course, that also builds the idea of listening to them, because listening to them will help you understand them. So that's like a dual deposit almost. It's a positive thing. Attending to the little things. So bearing this in mind all the time that you've got relationships going on. You can't just turn up, when you need something, right? That's perhaps another example. You might be able to think of that sometimes in work scenarios where you really find it trying that some individuals only seem to talk to you when they want something, right? And that's an example of how they haven't thought about or worked their emotional bank account with you. You need to keep attending to those little things, whatever they might be. Keeping commitments, classic, simple example. And that also links to the next one, clarifying expectations. If you can do that, if we're clear with people, if we deliver when we say we deliver in a work sense or in a non-work sense, that, if we said we're going to turn up and pick somebody up from the station, that we do it on time. Because for some people, that would be really upsetting, a real negative. For other people, less so. So it goes back to that idea of understanding the individual again. But keeping commitments is a key one, because for most people, if you don't meet your commitments, whatever they may be, they'll find it negative. Showing personal integrity. So that's the sense of standing up for yourself, standing up for other people, almost being ethical in a sense. So if you're hearing something that doesn't feel right, you're known for someone who would acknowledge that, try to address it, deal with it in your relationship with this other person. And then finally, of course, we do make withdrawals. It does happen. That's part of the argument. Debits, negatives happen. And so a key thing about this is to apologize really sincerely when that happens. So that again requires awareness of what's happening. And if something has accidentally turned out to be a withdrawal, never mind, because it still is seen as a withdrawal, so you need to apologize. Of course, you can explain how it was an accident, but it's important to apologize so that the other person understands you're genuine and it's not going to happen again, or unlikely to. So this is the idea of the emotional bank account. And as I say, I like it because it just tunes you into awareness. You can think about any relationship at all, work or otherwise, and use this little tool to think, so how am I doing? Where am I? Where are we at? What am I doing that's putting the credits in that builds up this relationship? And of course, you could turn it around and think, what's the other person doing towards me? Are they genuinely also putting credits into the relationship, or do I feel it's the other way? So I hope that makes sense. As I say, I think it's quite a straightforward idea, and I love its simplicity. And what I'd like you all to do just for the next 5 minutes, let me look at my watch. Yeah, let's go for 5 minutes, is take a piece of paper or do it on your tablet or whatever you'd like to write on. Draw the diagram that you can see in front of you with the simple T chart. If you're an accountant, that's a T chart, debits and credits. But let's not get into accountancy. That will just confuse. But draw that version and think, okay, what relationship would I like to just consider and analyze for a short while? It might be with your boss. It might be with somebody who's important to a new project that you're working on, or a project you've been working on for some time. It might be a scenario where you've got a bit of a challenging relationship with someone. It's just one you're not comfortable about. It doesn't seem to work as well as you would like. And as I say, work or otherwise, whatever works for you, you could think about it with your, with children or nieces or nephews. Children is a classic one, of course, because it's tricky with teenagers. So just think of somebody, think of a single person where you think it might be useful to explore, and spend 5 minutes just making some notes. What have you got in the debit column? What have you got in the credit column? Literally think of the activities that you've done or not done or could have done over recent weeks or relevant time period, and have a look at your relationship.